Hi there, I'm Lewis Foster, a journalist in the Manx radio newsroom, and welcome to this edition of Newscast. The family of Bryan Kneale, the Manx artist, with plans to install a new sculpture in Niarbyl, say they hope the installation will inspire. Plans for Ellipse were announced in January, with an image of the design plans posted online. It said Mr. Kneale wants the sculpture to be a respectful addition to the coastline, and he chose the site due to its stunning views up and down the coastline, as well as the area's geological history. Mr. Kneale, if you're not familiar, was born in Douglas in 1930 and studied painting at the Douglas School of Art in 1947. Manx residents will be familiar with his Three Legs of Man sculpture outside Ronaldsway Airport, as well as a number of his works inside the Manx Museum. And a statement on this latest sculpture says, bringing together 2- and 3-dimensional forms, the sculpture is designed to physically frame the landscape, creating a portal crossing time and place, a space for contemplation and passage. The sculpture will be seen in the landscape, but the landscape will also be seen through the sculpture, via a cut-out void in the centre of the artwork. Natural beauty and human creativity are brought together, with each visitor completing the scene from their own unique viewpoint and imagination. We'll hear more about that in just a moment, but in the meantime, Bryan Kneale's family, members of Manx National Heritage and the Isle of Man Arts Council have been holding a pre-planning consultation event at Dalby Schoolrooms today to get some feedback, hear what the public think about the plans. Ahead of that, I spoke with Bryan's daughter, Kate Kneale, and grandson, Tom Houghton.
It all kind of came from, my dad had a stroke a long time ago, about 10 years ago, and he could only then paint. He taught himself to draw and paint again because he was paralysed for a bit after that. And so he's been painting, and his paintings are sculptors' paintings. They're 3-dimensional forms. And during lockdown, he became more and more interested in how you frame a form. And actually his obsession was about the Manx landscape, and he spent a lot of time exploring the Isle of Man in his mind in lockdown, thinking about looking through a shape to the island as he remembered it. And so he did a whole series of paintings, and it ended up with him painting this oval ellipse form over some of the paintings that he's made. And then finally, just before the exhibition, which was held in London, he announced he was going to make one last piece of sculpture, and it was to be this ellipse. So it's a sculpture with a void in the middle, but it's about what you see through it. And in his mind's eye, he'd been seeing the Manx landscape through it.
And you say he tested a few different coastlines. Was that where the position Niarbyl came up there? Is that a particular favourite spot of Bryan's?
Yeah. We because my father's too frail to travel now, so we were dispatched as a family to come over, and we were given a series of pointers. We were given Scarlet, Schlock, and Niarbyl, the chasms. These, and you can tell they're geological places where the island meets the sea, and those were what he was imagining. And so we were given a map of instructions, and we went round the island, seeing on his behalf, really, and photographing and things. And then when we arrived at Niarbyl, we knew that was the sort of summation of all the things he told us about the island and those things, yeah.
And describe to us then the sculpture in question. We've seen, like I say, that mock-up so far, but you've got a little model in front of us showing sort of a bit more of the height, the dimensions, and how it will look in the landscape. Do you think that's important to kind of get across and show how it would fit in its surroundings?
Absolutely, this is a landscape. This is a landscape piece, and it's framing the landscape. It's talking about where the land and the sea meet, but it's a human scale piece of sculpture. And I think I've got a wonderful picture of my dad walking around looking at the standing stones on the Isle of Man, and it relates to the sort of the scale of the human and the human in the landscape.
Yeah, it was one of the things we wanted to make clear with the little diorama that we've got here on the table, is that it's not something that's purely on the cliff edge to be sort of looking out. It's going to be more on the lawn behind Niarbyl Cafe, and that you'll be able to get around it, and it won't sort of like be a single perspective. It's something you can view from multiple angles and sort of interact with, and it's just over sort of 8 feet tall is the intention, and so it's something that's much like human scale rather than something that is other, if that makes sense.
And you are getting some feedback down at the Dalby Schoolrooms this afternoon. You've got it's an open meeting, a chance for the public to come along and have a look at some of these designs and give their own feedback. And of course, we'll have seen some feedback online already, but only based on that one specific photograph so far. Do you think once people get the chance to have a look at it in more context, that it will make a bit more sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that one of the things that only a flat single image does is it strips away a lot of the detail that seeing it in a context where, like, our little model here has people, so you can see how it relates to the size it is in relation to people, and the more images you have of it will frame it better in the context. That obviously had a very single image, and we want to show it next to the cafe and its proximity to the other bits of the landscape, and so hopefully once we've got an opportunity to share some more details beyond the invitation that we sent out, that people will have a better idea of what Grandpa Bryan will had in mind and we'd like to propose for everyone.
I think it's because it's a piece of work that's completed by you, the visitor, the audience, playing with it and framing it and creating your own stories and views, putting your friend the other side of it. You know, it's a work to be played with, enjoyed, and engaged with. It's only completed by the viewer. It's not. It's not complete in itself.
Photographed as well, I imagine. That's a very much something that has to be taken into account by artists of sculptures of this kind. Call it Instagrammable almost, don't they? So is that very much part of the thought process of this design?
I don't think my dad at 94 was coming at it from Instagram, to be honest, but I think he was coming at it from the human interaction, and so a different generation would say human interaction, participation. But I did notice that the RA, Royal Academy, had picked up on it and used it on their Instagram. Yeah.
And Tom, the Isle of Man, in your perspective, I'm not sure, were you brought up here, or is it very much something that you've heard tale of through your grandfather, and that love? We know Bryan has love for the Isle of Man, hence this dedication and this sculpture that he wants to put forward. Has that transferred through the generations? Yeah,
so I wasn't brought up here, but have been lucky enough to visit both with Grandpa and with other members of my family, and have sort of heard the stories my whole life of the island, and sort of it's sort of seeped into the family. This is a tangent, but it's the thing that there was often the use of the word Giroud in the family, which I didn't realise was a Manx word. That was just a thing that was sort of permeated. But so it's a fascinating place, and I've loved being part of this project. Has meant it's been an opportunity, an excuse to be more sort of so I've been reading a lot more about the history of the island, why it's named certain things, the language, the sort of folklore particularly is something I'm really interested in. So the standing stones and that link to this piece is really wonderful. So it's certainly something that I'm relishing the opportunity to work on.
And your grandfather's link to the island as well is undeniable. I was only at the Manx Museum in the National Art Gallery last week, where some of his designs and sculptures are there in situ. Of course, we have the Three Legs of Man outside the Isle of Man airport. So this very much would be an addition. Does Bryan see this as like you say, a final sculpture, but a gift to the Isle of Man?
He does. He sees it as a final sculpture. And he sees it as a sort of he's drawn on the Isle of Man throughout his life. And if you read his the book about him, he talks about every time he's needed to take a step back, reinvent himself, rebuild himself, he draws on the ancient energies of the Isle of Man, and I think this is bringing that full circle. It's run through his entire life, and this would complete the circle of his creative life by placing that work there. Yeah.
And if you consider it as like a tribute, you've got the airport sculpture as a tribute to the nationality, but this very much a landscape. Does that feel like completing the picture almost?
I think it does, but I think it does. But I think the other thing to know about my father is that all his life he's taught, and he's been enormously influential in working with art schools and teaching other and inspiring other people. And I think this is really sits into this work as well. That it's a light touch piece that's inviting other people to explore their own creativity in the light of the context of the Isle of Man. So it's about it's not an end and a dead end and a selfish piece. It's a piece that's intended to open up these ideas for the next generation as well.
And we'll come to today then. Later on, you'll be at the Dalby Schoolrooms between midday and 6:30. Why should people come down?
Well, it'll just be an opportunity for us to sort of speak to people who are interested in knowing more about the project and hear their thoughts on something that is going to be hopefully gifted to the island and be there for people to enjoy. So we'd love to sort of share some of the more information about the designs and the scale of it and what the intention behind it is and hear what people think about how they might interact with it, whether or not they feel that it's going to be a good sort of representation of Manx heritage and sort of inspire other people as that, which is what we hope. So.
And what are the hopes in terms of timeline? If all goes well this afternoon and you get some positive feedback, of course, there's the bid in for funding as well. When would you like to see this sculpture formed and in place?
Well, I'm going to push this back to the Isle of Man actually, because we've been able to raise the funding for the work. And so that's all in place. So it's to do with planning and process and things. I would love to see it, pushed through planning and get on with it. And I think today's not a good day to install a piece of sculpture. So I think there's a window between the sort of summer and autumn. Ideally this year, if we can do it, it would be fabulous.
Nice to have that grand unveiling on a picturesque day. Absolutely.
No, it'll stand up to this kind of weather. I just wouldn't be installing it on this kind of day.
The only sort of thread that we particularly liked when visiting the sort of list of locations that Grandpa gave us was the discovery at Niarbyl, because we'd been exploring and looking at and were taken with the very wonderful fishermen's cottages that are just below it. And this was us exploring and sort of like having a look around. And it was only a little bit later on when we were looking them up to learn more about them that we discovered that was the one of the filming locations for the year of the Sex Olympics that his brother had done, which is I don't know if you're sort of familiar with it, but the sort of BBC drama that his brother who had written the TV drama. So the idea that there was this link between the two brothers of this particular place was particularly like a sign that it was a particularly wonderful choice of location. So,
and I think the thing about that is that again it's going forward into Manx creativity, because that's writing and filmmaking, theatre work, painting and sculpture. So it's sort of those brothers were so inspired by this island, and to have a sort of location where we could think about all those different art forms seemed kind of magical, really.
That's what I'd like to sort of see if we sort of like get the planning and everything, and it goes forward. Then we can look at getting sort of the whether or not it's people going and being inspired. Like I don't know, the sort of getting school groups down to do drawings of the landscape, or whether or not it's people who are interested in writing to go and sort of see the cottages, or sort of the how these two brothers have created so much that might inspire other people. I think would be really wonderful.
Thank you for making it to the end of the Little Manx Radio Newscast. You are obviously someone with exquisite taste. May I politely suggest you might want to subscribe to this and a wide range of Manx Radio podcasts at your favourite podcast provider, so our best bits will magically appear on your smartphone. Thank you.